Denny Hamlin says on his podcast, Action Detrimental, that he did not touch Kyle Larson, and Kyle Larson says on his podcast that he disagrees, and it sounds like Andretti Autosport might be getting close to joining the Cup Series and might partner with Spire Motorsports. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start talking about sponsors. As it was reported by Adam Stern, I believe, on Monday evening, that Molson was down to one race a year while FedEx is down to half the season. This, of course, was in a whole sponsor report that I think Adam Stern had reported about a week ago. Obviously, a lot of big of the Fortune 500 companies have dropped their sponsorship in the NASCAR Cup Series over the last few years. In 2005, I think there was 60% of Fortune 500 companies sponsored NASCAR. Now, I think there's only 20% of those or 23% of those companies that are sponsored NASCAR Cup Series teams. Now, it's interesting to think about. Obviously, FedEx is likely going to renew with Joe Gibbs Racing, and Denny Hamlin is likely going to return, but it's very interesting to think about when it comes to sponsors. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Red Bull. As it was reported in that same report that Red Bull, the title sponsor, Shane Van Gisbergen's team Down Under, is sitting on the sidelines, leaving exposure to Embrace Health. Embrace Health is going to sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen once again in the upcoming race of the Indy Road Course. Of course, he's going to return at the Indy Road Course with Trackhouse Racing. But Red Bull, of course, has not been involved in NASCAR since the 2011 season. They actually did technically were a little bit of a sponsor on his car, I think on his helmet when he raced in the Chicago Street Race. But Red Bull has not been really part of NASCAR in a very long time. I would love to see him come back one day, but it sounds like at the moment they're not coming back and they're sitting on the sidelines waiting for the right moment and the right opportunity. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Brad Perez. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Brad Perez will drive the 44 for Alpha Prime Racing this weekend at Road America. Brad Perez is one of the better road course racers in the field, has a lot of road course experience. We'll be looking to get the Alpha Prime Racing team a really strong run. Alpha Prime Racing has struggled in the 2023 season, so hopefully Brad Perez can come in there and have a fantastic run with them. I think he did technically make a start with them earlier this year at Portland, a substitution for Leland Honeyman Jr. Nonetheless, this is a great opportunity for him this weekend at Road America. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Will Rogers. As it was announced on Monday that Will Rogers will drive a 0-2 for Young's Motorsports this weekend in Richmond. Will Rogers made his first truck start earlier this year at Bend, Ohio to do some struggles and also called out a lot of drivers in the Truck Series field. I am a little surprised that Will Rogers has not run the Xfinity Series race, considering they're going to be at a road course, and Will Rogers is a really good road course racer. But I feel like this team is giving another shot, another opportunity, that being Young's Motorsports, to help them out. So he was really fast and had good speed, but unfortunately got in a lot of trouble that really was not his fault. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Mason Massey. As it was announced yesterday that Mason Massey will drive the 20 for Young's Motorsports this weekend at Richmond. Really good to see Mason Massey back in the Truck Series. He was supposed to run full-time in the Truck Series with the Ram Brothers this year, but unfortunately something fell through in the middle portion of the year that I'm really not going to get into. That being said, this is once again a really good opportunity for Mason. I think this truck's good enough to make it an owner's point, so hopefully he'll have a good enough run in that truck and do a good job in the truck this weekend at Richmond. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stanton Barrett. As it was announced yesterday that Stanton Barrett will drive the 35 for Emerald Gase Motorsports this weekend at Road America. This will be the first time that Stanton Barrett has raced in NASCAR in general, I believe, since 2019 season. It's really good to see Stanton Barrett back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Had some okay runs back in the day. He's been racing for a very long time. Obviously a stunt driver as well. DeBakes almost ran full-time in 2003 for Roush Racing when they were still called Roush at the time in 2003 in Xfinity. Nonetheless, it's a great opportunity for Stan. Hopefully, he can have a really good job and do great this weekend at Road America. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Kevin Boney Mannion. As it was announced yesterday morning that Kevin Mannion will become the interim crew chief for Ty Dillon starting this weekend at Richmond. Obviously, Ty Dillon has struggled so far in the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series season, where he's blown a lot of drivers in points, including drivers who've missed races, haven't had huge points penalties. He's sitting 32nd or 33rd in the points currently at this moment. And like I said, Ty Dillon has struggled. Now, if you want my personal opinion, opinion, I think Kevin Boney Man is a really good crew chief to work with. But I'll say this. I don't think the crew chief is going to fix everything going on at that 77 team. This is no disrespect to Ty Dillon, but Ty Dillon, I think he's one of the worst drivers in the Cup Series field today. And I don't think anyone coming in there to work as a crew chief with him is really going to solve the problem. So I appreciate what they're trying to do to fix the problems there. But in my honest opinion, I don't think Kevin Boney Man's going to come in there and fix stuff. Obviously, Spire's got some big stuff they're working on behind the scenes currently that we'll talk about here later in this episode. But I don't think Kevin Boney Man is going to fix the issues for Ty Dillon and for Spire Motorsports in general. But I'm glad to see that he's going to be back behind a pit box in the Cup Series. I think it's been a little bit since he's been behind a pit box. Obviously, he's been a crew chief for Jamie McMurray back in 2010 Daytona 500 and won him some races as well back in the day. And also, he's won a championship, Mark Truex Jr., Xfinity, I think, back in 2004. And he's also been part of the Truck Series program as well, been overseeing that operation at this point. But nonetheless, I don't think Kevin Boney Manning is going to come and fix and solve the problems for the team this weekend. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Hungarian Grand Prix TV ratings. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday or Monday evening that ESPN got a 1.035 million viewers for Sunday's F1 race at Hungary. That is down from 1.249 million for 2022. That is probably the biggest drop I've seen from Formula One race in the last couple of years. And I think one of the reasons why Formula One has been dropping the ratings is because of Red Bull's dominance. Red Bull has won 12 straight races. They've won every single race so far in 2023. And Max Verstappen has won 7 of the last 7 consecutive races in Formula One. A lot of people are going to tune out. They're not going to watch as much because they're tired of domination. That's one of the reasons why NASCAR dropped the ratings, is because of domination and drivers winning a lot. If you win a lot, people are going to get tired of it and they're going to get bored of it and they're going to stop watching. And that's one of the reasons I think why Formula One is continuing to hurt their growth. Also, you got the Las Vegas reports that came out very, very recently. That doesn't help in the situation too much. But overall, in my opinion, I'm not completely shocked. I'm not completely surprised about the huge drop in TV ratings. And again, it doesn't surprise me. Formula One is not as exciting this year. It was exciting more last year and in 2021 as well. But this year has just not been exciting. Max Verstappen has a 110-point lead over Sergio Perez currently at the moment. And it's very likely to lock the championship with 5 races to go, which is absolutely insane. So he can lock the championship up in like 5 or 6 weeks. At the end of the day, it's not as exciting at this moment, and it's not the most exciting situation, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Iowa doubleheader TV ratings. There's just more positive news when it comes to TV ratings. As reported by Adam Stern yesterday, the NBC says it averaged 1.121 million viewers for the Iowa doubleheader. That is up 31% from 2022. Absolutely major dub, in my opinion, for Iowa. They did a lot more promotion for this event. It's one thing I can definitely tell. Obviously, Highway's been doing a lot of promotion with their company as well. They obviously are a big reason why Iowa Speedway is back on the IndyCar schedule and the racing schedule in the first place. But it's really good to see, nonetheless, that Iowa Speedway and the TV ratings are really, really good. I thought the racing itself and the races were actually really, really exciting and really, really fun to watch, and I really absolutely enjoyed it. So great to see the TV ratings up for the Iowa weekend. I think it's an absolute huge dub for IndyCar, in my opinion, and very happy, nonetheless, to see that this is, in my opinion, is an absolute huge and great dub for IndyCar, and glad to see that Iowa TV ratings are up for this race. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the New Hampshire TV ratings. Now, the New Hampshire TV ratings had kind of come out earlier in the week, back on Monday. Obviously, had the NASCAR Cup Series race on Monday, and the TV ratings kind of got delayed due to the strike that's going on with TV brands. But according to Adam Stern, USA got a 0.61 rating and 1.032 million viewers for last week's NASCAR event at New Hampshire. That was on Monday. That honestly was really, really good ratings considering on a Monday in the middle of the afternoon. Maybe could have been up a little bit more, but to have over 1 million people tune in is honestly not that bad, all things considered. Obviously, a lot of people have stuff going on. A lot of people that are working during the time. Of course, a lot of NASCAR fans, a lot of people do work in that current age. And it doesn't completely surprise or completely shock me at this point that the ratings were not insanely high. But honestly, the ratings for the New Hampshire weekend are not terrible and not that bad, all things considered. So nonetheless, good to see in my opinion, at least over 1 million people tuned in. I think that Dover got like 1.06 million, so it's a little bit down from the Dover weekend, but it's kind of relatively close. Again, I think they're being held in the middle of the afternoon on USA Network, which isn't the biggest brand in the world. Also, from what I understand, they did not change the TV guide, so a lot of people didn't even know the racing was going on, so NBC's got to do a better job when it comes to that. But in my opinion, the ratings are not that bad for a Monday race, all things considered. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Milwaukee Mile. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that the latest IndyCar calendar rumors had the August Indy Road Course round being traded for the long-awaited return to the Milwaukee Mile. Now, why is one of the reasons why this could be happening? Well, one of the rumors going on right now is that the Brickyard 400 is potentially going to return in 2024, meaning that one of the Indy Road Course weekends is going to go away for IndyCar. If you know a lot of IndyCar fans and NASCAR fans like myself, we do not like the Indy Road Course as much. And obviously, there's been a lot of rumors since back last year. The IndyCar wants to return to the Milwaukee Mile. The Milwaukee Mile has not hosted IndyCar race, from what I understand, since 2015. And I believe Sebastian Bourdais went on to win that race. If you want my opinion, I think they need more ovals on the IndyCar schedule. I think the oval product in IndyCar is one of the best when it comes to their product. And I think Milwaukee will put on a really awesome product as well. Obviously, the Truck Series is coming back to the Milwaukee Mile for the first time since 2009. It would not surprise me if they do have a doubleheader with IndyCar, though I will say that'll be after Daytona week, so that'd be a little bit frustrating there. But in my opinion, this is really, really cool to see that there's conversations about the Milwaukee Mile returning. I think a lot of those fans do want the Milwaukee Mile to come back for IndyCar because I think the racing would be really good. I think it would be awesome. Nonetheless, I really do hope that we get to see Milwaukee Mile make a return. So I think a lot of those fans would be happy and excited about the return of it. Hopefully, it does make its first turn IndyCar. Maybe, just maybe, the NASCAR Cup Series one day could get on the schedule as well at that racetrack. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey LaJoie. Now, last night on the Second Pennies podcast, Corey LaJoie explained his side on the situation of what happened with him and Ryan Preece. If you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race with 2 laps to go, Corey LaJoie accidentally got into Ryan Preece. He washed up the racetrack and spun Ryan Preece out. Ryan Preece was very, very unhappy with the situation and ended up basically going up and confronting Corey LaJoie, called him the POS, was very unhappy with him, and was ready to throw hands and square up. Corey LaJoie, like I said on his podcast, explained his side of the situation. He thought that Alex Bowman, who had already been pissed off at him throughout the week, basically from the Chicago Street Course when Alex Bowman had gotten turned by Corey LaJoie, he thought that he was going to get turned by Alex Bowman. He was going to send it 3 wide, but basically he did not end up doing that, and Corey basically unfortunately thought they were 3 wide, but they weren't, and he washed up into the racetrack. I love that Corey LaJoie basically went on his podcast and explained his perspective of exactly everything that happened. If you want my personal opinion, I think Corey LaJoie did make a mistake. And I think Ryan Preece definitely had every right to be frustrated and upset at Corey LaJoie. I know there's been a couple weeks where Ryan Preece has been wrecked, and a lot of people say, well, Ryan Preece always gets pissed. Well, Ryan Preece has been wrecked quite a bit this year in 2023 by a lot of drivers, so I can understand his frustration completely. And I think it's absolutely right that he was frustrated, at least about that. Nonetheless, it's very interesting to see. I'm glad that Corey LaJoie went on and explained his perspective. I love it when drivers go on and explain this. I wish drivers could do that more, especially on their podcasts, which we'll talk about podcasts here at the end of this episode. But nonetheless, I think it's really cool to see that you've got guys like Corey LaJoie explaining their perspective of exactly what happened on his podcast. I think it's really awesome and really cool to see, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Pocono TV ratings from this past weekend. And they're really positive. As reported by Adam Stern yesterday, the USA got a 1.58 rating and 2.808 million viewers for Sunday's NASCAR race at Sold Out Pocono. That is up from a 1.56 rating and 2.59 million viewers in 2022, meaning about a 1 to 2% increase in the ratings department and about I think like a 10 or 11% increase in the viewership department. That is absolutely huge and absolutely amazing and awesome to see for a lot of reasons, because Pocono, I think, was one of the more exciting races we've seen this year. I know I kind of said it wasn't the most exciting in my race review, but I went back and watched the Pocono race, and I will say it was an awesome and really, really fun strategy-filled race. It wasn't the most exciting when it came to passing, but I think when it comes to strategy and setting up and making a run, I thought it was really, really fun and really, really enjoyable for the fans at home. And seeing the energy of that crowd made you more excited to be there, because the crowd was sold out. They had their largest largest crowd since 2010, I believe. It is the first sold-out crowd they've had in a few years. So that energy really carried in this event, and it was absolutely huge for this racing event overall. And I really think Pocono has become a very solid track on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, especially over the last couple of years. I think it's really exciting to see that the ratings continue to go up. We've had a lot of races this year with TV ratings being up, and just glad to see overall that NASCAR is heading in a more positive direction. And like I said, to see the TV ratings up for this event are really awesome, really great to see, and nonetheless very happy to see the TV ratings because again, I think it's a huge positive for the sport when you have TV ratings up and almost 10 or 11% increase in your viewership, which is something NASCAR doesn't always see at this point. We've been seeing more people tune into races, and it's been more enjoyable to watch as a fan because when you see TV ratings increases, it's more positive, especially when it comes to the upcoming TV deal, which hasn't been decided at this point. It's going to be a little later in the year that we find out exactly what partners are going to be part of that TV deal. But if USA and NBC continue to deliver their broadcasts, which their broadcasts have been really awesome and exciting, they're going to have a good chance of picking up the next TV deal. It's exciting, it's fun, and glad to see the TV ratings are up for this year. Really awesome stuff. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch was on Sirius NASCAR radio, I believe, earlier this morning or a couple days ago, and Kyle Busch spoke on the racing in the NASCAR Cup Series and basically spoke on the difference of racing that he's seen over the last couple of years. And he said one of the reasons why the racing has absolutely changed in the NASCAR Cup Series is basically of the younger generation has come from ARCA, the Truck Series, Xfinity, and now they've all moved up with the racing etiquette that they learned in those series and moved it up to the Cup Series, and all the drivers are doing this. And he also explains that it's a vicious cycle as well. Kyle Busch, in my opinion, is absolutely right on that. It's definitely changed in the culture of the racing in the Cup Series, has absolutely changed over the last couple of years. We've seen drivers be a lot more aggressive out on the racetrack, drivers making really, really big and aggressive moves overall. And I think while it does create some really exciting racing, the respect in NASCAR definitely has changed and it's gone away. Now, granted, drivers do have respect for each other on the track, but I feel like that has been slowly but surely decaying over the last 5 or 6 years. And like Kyle said, has come from the drivers who've come from the lower series who have moved up to the NASCAR Cup Series. Don't get me wrong, I like when we see racing and they're racing hard, but I also don't want to see drivers taking out each other and making bold, aggressive moves and not taking responsibility like we'll talk about here near the end of this episode. But I will agree with Kyle Busch. The racing has definitely changed in the NASCAR Cup Series. Is it for the better? I really don't know. It probably is for the worse, let's be honest. But overall, I don't think Kyle Busch is completely wrong. I think he's actually right about it, and I think Kyle Busch is 100%. And I do agree with him, by the way, that the racing etiquette in NASCAR has changed over the last few years. It's changed a lot, and it's not a shocker and surprise that Kyle Busch should say something because he's been in the sport for a very, very long time, and he knows about racing etiquette in general and knows everything about it, and he's absolutely correct about it, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. Now, if many of you noticed, Kurt Busch was most recently not at Pocono Raceway. And it was basically a very emotional post he put out yesterday talking about the fact he still has love for 2311 racing. He just felt like it wasn't a time to come back to the racetrack, at least at Pocono, and be back there. Obviously, for many people who do not know, about a year ago on Sunday, Kurt Busch had a really, really bad crash, basically back in the outside wall, and had concussion-like symptoms from that. And he still has not been medically cleared to race since that incident. I think a lot of his fans do feel for Kurt Busch, and I understand Kurt Busch not being at the racetrack, especially with what happened there. And I think a lot of his fans, including myself, do want to see Kurt Busch return. Now, Kurt Busch has stated publicly a few months ago that he's hoping to make a return in the not-so-distant future, but he has to get medically cleared by doctors to do that. He has been working toward making a return to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, and basically returning to NASCAR. But I think it's going to be a little bit for Kurt. I wouldn't be surprised it won't be till next year he comes back, to be honest. I thought there was a chance maybe this year he'd come back, but I'm starting to think the earliest that Kurt Busch could make a return is next year in 2024. He has said publicly that he wants to go and race and do like maybe at Darlington, go race at his home track once again like Las Vegas, go back to racetracks that he think are legendary. Also, Watson is another track he liked to race at, and nonetheless, I think Kurt Busch is enjoying it. He's been a big aspect of helping 2311 Racing grow as an organization. He saw Bubba Wallace say they become a better driver. Bubba Wallace has been having a really strong year in the Cup Series this year. He's having a career year. And of course, Tyler Reddick helping Reddick come into that team, especially after what happened last year around this time. I think Reddick has done an amazing and incredible job at 2311 Racing. Nonetheless, I think it's really cool. I mean, it sucks to see that Kurt wasn't at the racetrack, but we all understand his decision to not be there, in my opinion. And hopefully, Kurt Busch does come back. I think he'll likely come back this upcoming weekend, which, of course, we're going to be at Richmond, which Kurt Busch does have a lot of great history at this track. And I think Kurt Busch could. When do I think Kurt will come back to the racetrack and race? I think that's going to be something we're going to have to wait on for sure. But I think it won't be terribly too long. Hopefully, by the time we get to the end of the year, maybe Kurt says, you know what, I'm medically cleared. He's obviously 1 point said he may want to go full time and come back fully into the sport. Nonetheless, I really hope he does come back in the future and race in the NASCAR Cup Series. Hopefully that ends up happening relatively soon. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch once again. As Kyle Busch officially has a new sponsor for this upcoming weekend at Richmond Raceway. The company that sponsored him is World X Wallet. Now, something interesting to note, they're actually a branch of the Netspend company. So some people say they're not a new sponsor, but this actually is a new sponsor. And it's really good to see, and I'm happy to see that Kyle Busch is continuing to pick up new sponsorships and new brands as well. Obviously, Kyle Busch is continuing to get new brands. Obviously, Kyle Busch lost his ride at Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of 2022, and now is driving for Rich Hills Racing. And one of the biggest reasons is why, because they couldn't find a full season sponsor. Rich Hills Racing does things a lot differently when it comes to their sponsorship model, basically compared to how Joe Gibbs Racing does it. Joe Gibbs Racing, they want to basically have a full season sponsor, a sponsor that is going to sponsor for majority of the season, which I think the model that Rich Hills Racing is doing currently at the moment, I think is going to be the way to go long term. I think you're going to see a lot more teams like Joe Gibbs Racing inevitably start working toward that. And I think you've kind of noticed that a little bit. We're not seeing Denny Hamlin sponsored by one company every single week. We've seen Mavis come in and sponsor for quite a few races. We've seen other companies work with Denny Hamlin, and FedEx has not been sponsoring for a lot of races. They've been backing down their sponsorship, even though it's very likely at this point that FedEx is going to return to JGR and sponsor Denny Hamlin 2024, though it's pretty much confirmed that Hamlin is going to be back next year at this point. But again, we're still waiting on the announcement in regards to that. But I think going back and talking about Kyle Busch getting new sponsors, had new companies come into play this year. Netspend, Mark III Van Benefits, obviously 3Chi and Cheddar's, which were part of the RCR brand. It's been great to see Kyle Busch continue to pick up new sponsorships, new brands in the sport, and I think Kyle Busch is going to continue to do that. One thing I'd like to see is maybe one day Budweiser come into play and maybe sponsor Kyle Busch in the future. Maybe I know they're going to be working with Ross Chastain next year, that being Anheuser-Busch, and the one team next year. But I think it'd be really cool if they decided to work with Kyle Busch instead, or basically work with somebody else as well. But I think it is nonetheless really awesome and great to see that Kyle Busch is continuing to pick up new sponsors and brands. I think it's huge. It's going to continue that storyline of people trying to go against Joe Gibbs. Obviously, we're not too far away from the anniversary of Kyle Busch when he joined Joe Gibbs Racing at this one, which is August 14, 2008. 2007 it was announced. But nonetheless, Kyle Busch has a new sponsor for this weekend. I think it's really exciting and really great to see, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. Now, we're going to talk about Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson's incident here near the end of this episode. But Martin Truex Jr. after the NASCAR race spoke to Claire B. Lane on SiriusXM NASCAR radio. And he even called, and basically Martin Truex Jr., who's a teammate of Denny Hamlin's, even calls out Denny Hamlin and says the move that Denny Hamlin made was a pretty dirty move. When your teammate is calling you out on a radio show, that is never a good sign. I think a lot of us fans, including myself, do agree that what Denny Hamlin did was pretty dirty. A lot of people say, well, why does Martin Truex Jr. have a right to say this? Well, Martin Truex Jr. was directly behind both Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin when the incident ended up happening. So if anybody is right there to be an eyewitness to, has a bird's eye view of exactly what ended up happening, Martin Truex Jr. is going to be the guy there because he's right behind him when the incident ended up happening. Of course, he ended up finishing third in the Cup Series race behind Tyler Reddick and, of course, Denny Hamlin as well. And when Martin Truex Jr. is someone who has always raced respect and always races very, very clean. And Martin Truex Jr. and I think Kyle Larson mentioned this, and Martin Truex Jr. kind of said the same thing as well. And I think when it comes to Martin Truex Jr., I think he's absolutely right. I thought the move was absolutely dirty by Denny Hamlin. I know it's aggressive and you're going for a win, but you move Kyle Larson up the racetrack and put him in the outside wall. And for Martin Truex Jr. to be even his teammate, even when your teammates are not defending you, that's never a good sign. Usually you do not see teammates defending him. But I think that Denny Hamlin has raced Martin Truex Jr. in the past as well with not a ton of respect. So it doesn't completely surprise and shock me that Martin Truex Jr. is also kind of calling out Denny Hamlin, considering, like I said, I don't think Denny Hamlin has raced Martin Truex Jr. with always the most and utmost respect. And I think Martin has been frustrated with that. And Martin Truex Jr., I think, is the most respectable driver in the NASCAR Cup Series today. The way he races people with respect, he races very, very clean. And I think that's why Martin Truex Jr. is someone who's won a lot of races nowadays. So I will say it would have been harder now to win the championship because of the points format. You have to be a lot more aggressive nowadays if you want to succeed. But I agree with Martin Truex Jr. I thought the move was a little bit aggressive. I thought it might have been a little bit dirty as well. And it's really interesting to see that a driver like Martin Truex Jr. and the caliber he has, he's calling out Denny Hamlin. It's interesting. It's kind of an interesting move, but nonetheless, it's not a complete surprise that Martin Truex Jr. is calling out his own teammate Denny Hamlin, considering it was a very, very aggressive move. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about a ton of silly season rumors. Now, on the Door Bumper Clear podcast, they were going in and talking about Justin Haley. And then they started bringing up a ton of rumors and potential possibilities on who could be in different rides. The first thing mentioned is around the 10 car. And they think that right now the front runners, once again, like we've heard, are Michael McDowell and Zane Smith. Now, Brett Griffin disagrees. I think someone else could end up getting the ride. But it sounds like Michael McDowell and Zane Smith are currently the two favorites to go to the 10 car, which isn't a surprise and a shock at this point. We know that a lot of industry insiders have said it in the industry. There's a really good chance that both drivers could end up driving the 10 car in 2024. I personally think it's going to be Michael McDowell who's going to end up driving that 10 car in 2024 because Zane Smith is under contract with Front Row through the 2026 season. Now, there could be some wild cards to watch out for, like Matt DiBenedetto could be in play. I think Shane Van Gisbergen's name is going to be mentioned as a potential possibility. And I think a lot of other drivers could have a chance and a shot to get behind the wheel. Next, someone from Junior Motorsports might be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing. It sounds there's a lot of talk currently that Brandon Jones may be leaving the Junior Motorsports camp at the end of 2023 and might be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. Brandon Jones has struggled in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Junior Motorsports this year, has not had a good year, and I feel like Junior Motorsports gotten frustrated. It sounds like there's a chance he might be going back to Xfinity and might be going back to Joe Gibbs' Xfinity program, driving the 19 car, which honestly wouldn't be a terrible move. Next, Junior Motorsports sounds like it might be having some shuffling going on at the team. There's obviously the A car that's going to be available. There's a lot of drivers who could end up driving the A car. You've got Carson Hocevar, who's the favorite, but we'll talk about Carson here in a little bit. Carson Quaffel's names I mentioned quite a bit, maybe for the A car next year as well. Another name that keeps getting mentioned is Jeffrey Earnhardt, obviously the nephew of Dale Jr. So it sounds like there's a chance Jeffrey might have a chance to drive the A car, which I said this in a video I think on Monday, that I think Jeffrey Earnhardt deserves a chance and an opportunity in top-tier equipment. He has not really had that opportunity and shot to be in top-tier equipment in his career. Something that Freddie Kraft mentioned next to is that Bubba Wallace apparently only has 1 year left on his contract with 23XI Racing, which I find interesting because I thought that Bubba Wallace signed a multi-year deal. So it sounds like Bubba could be a free agent at the end of 2024, but I would imagine that Bubba Wallace is likely going to get a contract extension, probably a multi-year deal with 23XI. I think Bubba's going to finish his career with 23XI Racing. But the big rumor that started going on around is Carson Hocevar. And it sounds like from a lot of people and a lot of rumors have circulated that Carson Hocevar might join the Cup Series full-time in 2024. Now, a lot of people have said that he could go to Junior Motorsports NASCAR Xfinity Series program in the 2024 season, number 8 car, and I think he would be a really good choice for that A car, brings a great personality, and also has some sponsorship funding from Premier Security. But I think a lot of people are looking at maybe going to the Cup Series in 2024 and might be going to that second Spire Motorsports car. Because Spire Motorsports, it sounds like that Ty Dillon may be out of that ride at the end of the 2023 season. Ty Dillon has obviously not had a good year at Spire Motorsports in 2023. They've got new sponsor funding as well, like Gamebridge. So sponsorship may not be as big of an issue for that team going forward long term. But I think Carson Hocevar does have a really good chance to go in the Cup Series next year. I think Carson definitely is a really, really talented driver and knows how to get it done behind the wheel. But a thing for me that I don't know at this point is what exactly happens in a 77 car. Because I think Ty Dillon, like I said, is likely out of the 77 car at the end of the 2023 season. If you want my prediction, I think it comes down to Austin Hill or Carson Hocevar. But I think there's a good chance Austin Hill could also end up going to 31 car for call, but I think SVG, that means Shane Van Gisbergen, also has a chance to go to 31 car as well. It's going to be interesting nonetheless to see what happens in regards to the silly season. Silly season rumbles are starting to fly, and I think you're going to see a lot of crazy changes happening in the silly season very, very soon. It's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be crazy to watch. It's going to be something fun to watch for the fans, including myself, on what happens exactly in this upcoming NASCAR silly season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Andretti Autosport. Now, we've talked about Andretti Autosport quite a bit on this channel, whether because their Formula One program or trying to get into NASCAR. But it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that Andretti is focused on trying to get into F1. But a recent move by NASCAR by its major sponsor, Gamebridge, is indirectly serving as an experiment step in the stock car series. In addition to that, it was reported by Adam Stern last night that it's not clear how the Andretti Spire deal will look after this first initial step. Whether it'll involve a combined outfit, a full rebrand Andretti Global, or some other option. Meaning that there's a really good chance and a really strong possibility that Andretti is going to get into NASCAR. Obviously, Gamebridge, which is the biggest company and biggest sponsor for the Andretti Autosport Group, has been working, and the Group 1001 company has been also working with the basically Andretti for a long time, and now they're working with Spire Motorsports. It also is noted that Marco Andretti made his NASCAR Truck Series debut with Spire Motorsports, and also it's been rumored that he could be joining and racing full-time in the Truck Series or another form of racing, maybe with the Spire Motorsports Group in the not-so-distant future. Now, obviously, Andretti Autosport has attempted in the past to get into the NASCAR Cup Series and racing NASCAR in general. Back in 2012, they had revealed basically a Gen 6 car because Dodge, at the time, they were going to go to Dodge and work with Dodge, and Dodge was looking to maybe have a Gen 6 car ready to go. And Andretti Autosport was going to join the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the Cup Series, actually, in 2013 with a new Dodge Gen 6 car, and they were going to have Kurt Busch and potentially Matt Kenseth drive for their team in 2013. That is a huge reason why Kurt Busch ended up driving in the 2014 Indianapolis 500 with the team in the number 26 car for the team in 2014, where he ended up finishing in 6th, because Kurt Busch had worked basically with Andretti Autosport, was going to work with them, but unfortunately that deal inevitably ended up falling through. Now, we've heard rumors about Andretti Autosport over the last few years. There have been some talk that they were going to partner up maybe with Richard Petty Motorsports at a time in 2018 and work with that organization. And obviously, Richard Petty Motorsports had kind of worked with them in 2011 to give John Andretti a chance in a 43 car with the Andretti Group as well. But it's really interesting to think about when it comes to Andretti Autosport joining NASCAR. I think more teams that come into sport, the better. Now, obviously, I think there's a good chance this is going to end up happening because, again, the Gamebridge sponsorship is huge. Obviously, Corey LaJoie is likely going to return to the team. He's expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with Spire Motorsports starting in 2024, and that will probably go through 2025 and probably also the 2026 season. Now, the question is, will it happen in 2024 that Andretti comes in? I think the fact that we're starting to hear more rumblings and reports, because obviously they're trying to get the Formula One currently at the moment, and it sounds like there's a good chance that's going to get approved in the upcoming future. But I think when it comes to Andretti Autosport coming to NASCAR, I think if they do come to NASCAR, it's going to be absolutely huge. You have a lot of fans from IndyCar who might tune in to NASCAR for the first time, have never tuned in to NASCAR because you have that team coming in. Now the big question, though, is going to be, what happens to the team and who could be the drivers of this team? Obviously, like I mentioned with Corey LaJoie, he's likely to return to the team and continue to drive in the 7 car next season and with a multi-year deal. The 77 car, though, is interesting. I think Carson Osbar is the favorite to potentially drive that car in 2024. Obviously, Spire said they're not planning to sell their charters. They want to maybe expand. And Carson Osbar sounds like there's a good chance he could drive that car next year. You've also got Shane Van Gisbergen who get a chance and an opportunity. SVG, we know that he's looking to maybe go full-time in the Cup Series in 2024. And it sounds like all but confirmed at this point that he's going to be driving full-time in Cup in 2024. You've also got Matt DiBenedetto who could be available. I think Matt DiBenedetto is one of the more underrated drivers, and I could see him getting a chance and opportunity. What about someone like Carl Edwards somehow? Carl Edwards, I know he's interested in coming back to NASCAR. I think more than likely 2311 be the team that could basically do the one-off. What about Carl Edwards doing a one-off? And then you think about some people in the IndyCar team. Romain Grosjean's expressed interest. Colton Herta's expressed interest. I'll throw another name out there, Nick Sanchez. Nick Sanchez has a lot of truck series experience now and is partnered up with Gamebridge, and I think that they would love to maybe in the future, and inevitably in the future, move him up to the NASCAR Cup Series long term. I don't think Nick's ready at this point, but Nick Sanchez could absolutely be a possibility, and I wouldn't throw him out as a huge chance of him maybe going to the Cup Series in the not-so-distant future if the 77 was available. If you want my opinion, though, I'm starting to think Carson Osbar is the favorite for that 77 car. I think Ty Dillon is going to be out of the Spire Motorsports Group at the end of 2023. And I'm still thinking right now that you're going to see this guy, that being Carson Osbar, go full-time in Cup. Now, I would rather see him go full-time in Xfinity in 2024, but I'm starting to think at this particular moment that you're going to end up seeing Carson Osbar drive full-time in the Cup Series in 2024. Basically, at this point with Spire or the Andretti Group, whether they rebrand and maybe it's Spire Andretti Racing, who knows at this point, but it's going to be interesting to see, but it sounds like there's a really good chance and a great possibility that Spire Motorsports is going to be racing full-time with Andretti maybe partnering up with them in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson once again. Now, if you watch a NASCAR Cup Series race on basically probably all of you that watch the channel, probably watch a NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono. On a restart with 7 laps to go, Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson were basically on the first 2 rows. You had Denny Hamlin who gave a really good push to Kyle Larson going into the corner. Then Denny Hamlin goes to the bottom of the racetrack, sends it to the bottom, and forces Kyle Larson wide. There's some contact, and I think there was contact, and it forces Kyle Larson into the outside wall. Now, Denny Hamlin has said publicly multiple times, he said he did not touch Kyle Larson, and Kyle Larson disagreed, and Kyle Larson was very unhappy and really pissed. The 11 guys were not understanding why he was pissed, but I think a lot of fans know. And then after the race, of course, when Denny Hamlin came down the front stretch and got out of his car, there was a chorus of boos, some for the call that NASCAR made to throw the caution on the last lap, and basically when a car was sitting there, they could throw him a 2 to go. But also a lot of fans are pissed at Denny Hamlin on the way that he won the race. Now, we waited a little bit, and we were going to be wondering what Denny Hamlin was going to say on Actions Detrimental. Well, Denny Hamlin had his podcast on Monday, and he basically still believes, and he says on his podcast, that he did not touch Kyle Larson. He says that there basically is a narrative that he kind of touched him and hit him, and basically that is not true. Well, Kyle Larson went on his podcast, which he does with Brad Sweet and Dylan Walsh, and Kyle Larson says that Denny did touch him and plans to race Denny Hamlin differently. Basically, Kyle Larson went on to say, and Kyle Larson is also very self-aware of the way he's raced in the past as well. Basically saying that, yeah, I've raced guys with disrespect at times, and I expect to get that back. The way I race people, I expect to get that back. He brought up, I think, the Bubba Wallace incident. He brought up the way he raced Chase Elliott. But Kyle Larson said that he's never raced Denny Hamlin that aggressively and raced him really, really hard. He's always raced Denny Hamlin with respect, which is absolutely true. Now, if you want to get my take on it, I kind of gave my take earlier in the week on Monday. But I believe that Denny Hamlin did touch Kyle Larson. I don't think it was hard. I don't think it was insane contact. I don't think it was like really, really hard. But I think that Denny Hamlin absolutely touched Kyle Larson. And the fact that Denny Hamlin is not going to admit that, I think, one, he doesn't want to get a penalty. Because remember, Denny Hamlin got a penalty earlier this year for having contact with Ross Chastain at Phoenix. And a lot of people are going to bring up that similar incidents. Basically, when it comes to incident, Denny Hamlin did the same thing that he did to Ross Chastain last year. And Kyle Larson even said it on Sunday. He said that Ross Chastain probably deserved it. Ross Chastain absolutely deserved what he got from Denny Hamlin, and I think it was completely justified. What happened to Kyle Larson on Sunday, I personally don't think was completely fair and completely justified. I think Denny Hamlin did race Kyle Larson with no respect out on the racetrack, and Denny Hamlin should know this. It did not race like that. And for Denny Hamlin to not admit it, I think Denny Hamlin is not going to see that he has one coming, and Kyle Larson is probably going to race Denny Hamlin with less respect because he got raced with less respect. And like I said, Kyle Larson knows that he's raced drivers with disrespect in the past as well. Here's the difference. Kyle Larson's admitted to it many, many times. Denny Hamlin has really never admitted in his career that he's done anything wrong. I mean, he even made t-shirts on his website saying, "I'm always right," which is a little bit of a jab at Kyle Larson, which I don't completely like that Denny Hamlin did that, though it is a little funny, don't get me wrong. I don't completely like that. I think Denny Hamlin is completely wrong. I think the fact that he still believes that he did nothing wrong is a little baffling to me. Because Denny Hamlin absolutely did touch Kyle Larson. He didn't touch Ross Chastain, but he gave Kyle Larson no choice. And you can clearly see from Kevin Harvick's onboard, which Kyle Larson even said on his podcast, he clearly said that he touched him. And you can clearly see why it was very minimal contact and it wasn't enough, Pocono is a very aerosensitive track. And if you touch one of these cars, you're going to be going up into the wall and you're going to hit that outside wall and get a lot of damage. And Kyle Larson, I'm on his side completely because Kyle Larson is self-aware. He absolutely is right, in my opinion, in this situation. And I think Denny Hamlin has to learn this. And this is the thing about Denny Hamlin and why I think a lot of his fans are going to defend him. Obviously, got a lot of fans to defend him. But one of the reasons why a lot of fans of NASCAR, including myself, are a little frustrated Denny Hamlin is the fact that Denny Hamlin has gone on his podcast and said this for the last few years. He's gone on and basically said that we need to race each other with respect, and we're not getting respect out on the racetrack. Well, Denny Hamlin is a hypocrite for that because Denny Hamlin doesn't admit when he does something wrong. Just admit when you do something wrong. I am a big Kyle Larson fan, and I've grown to like Denny Hamlin a lot more over the last few years. I think he's got a good personality, he's got a good sense of humor, and he's someone that does speak about NASCAR and calls NASCAR on their BS sometimes, which I do like that. But in my opinion, I think Denny Hamlin is completely unjustified, and Kyle Larson's absolutely correct. Denny Hamlin never admits when he's wrong in situations. He basically never says he's always right at this point and never admits to when he's wrong. He'll complain to other drivers about the way they race him, like Chase Elliott, who right-reared him, which I think was justified for Denny to complain about that. But then he had forced Chase into the outside wall. And I think I just think Larson is not completely wrong in this situation. I think he's right. And I'm going to defend Kyle Larson in this situation a little bit more because while Kyle Larson has raced drivers with disrespect in the past, and Kyle Larson done it before, I think Kyle Larson knows that he expects to get back what's coming to him. So in my personal opinion, I think Kyle Larson's in the right in the situation. If Denny Hamlin gets raced with disrespect by Larson, Denny Hamlin better expect it, and he better not complain on his podcast about it the next day. So, that is going to today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go over that and comment your thoughts on today's video. Who do you think's right in this situation, Denny Hamlin or Kyle Larson? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Andretti Autosport potentially joining NASCAR and partnering up with Spire Motorsports? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm not sure if I have any more videos on the channel today. If any major NASCAR news breaks, we'll probably have a video later today. Then tomorrow, we're going to have a net race picks for the Cup Series race at Richmond and also have the SRX race review from Motor Mile. Then on Friday, there should be a NASCAR news video on the channel. And then Saturday, of course, we'll basically have the Xfinity Series and Truck Series race reviews from Road America and Richmond, pending the weather. And then Sunday, of course, pending the weather, we'll have a NASCAR Cup Series race review from Richmond. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.